Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. So, for those of you who have not seen anything of the final shape, this is a really quick, spoiler-free review in progress type video. And I say review in progress advisedly because, well, it is too soon to give a full conclusion on what the story of this expansion is like. That being said, if you want no spoilers, this first section of the video is for you, and I will clearly note when spoilers begin. If you are here and have completed the campaign, either normal or legendary, we'll talk about all that other stuff later. First of all, the no spoilers segment though, and some basic questions, amongst which the most obvious of them is this a good campaign? And I think the consensus online seems to be that the story is really, really good. Aztecross went as far as to give it a 10 out of 10. I've seen one or two people say it's perfect, and whilst I wouldn't go that far, I think it's fair to say that this is a really strong offering. For my 2 cents at the moment, I am not willing to render judgment yet, because it is really clear from the way that Bungie has talked about this both before and during Final Shape's campaign, so in the marketing stuff that they've released all the way up to now, and the campaign itself, that the campaign is just Act 1 of the story of the Final Shape, and that we are now going into the post-campaign stuff, aka Act 2, and that we will conclude this story in the raid, aka Act 3. More on that in a bit. If you wanted to know if you should play the Final Shape for the campaign, I think the answer across the core community is a resounding yes. Server issues were a big problem on day one though, and I want to go ahead and tell you that for the most part, they have subsided for the moment, so if you are waiting to jump in, now is a safe moment. However, for those of you who are like me and missed crucial cutscenes, I have a note for you. You can replay the missions and get those cutscenes that you missed. So, do note, you can go and do this by going to the legendary or normal campaign nodes on the Pale Heart destination, and then you just select the mission that you missed the cutscene for. If I'm not mistaken, the Bungie help account tweeted that there are cutscenes in missions 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7. Not entirely sure if that's the case, I'll need to double check that. Regardless, you will know if there is a mission you've missed something for, I'm sure of it, because of current errors. So if you aren't sure, go back and replay it. It takes a little bit of time, and I guarantee you, the cutscenes are well worth it. So, that's our spoiler-free section over. Here come the spoiler things. So, yeah, if you don't want to get spoiled, and if you haven't finished the campaign yet, get out now. This is your chance. They gone? Okay, let's talk about things. When I talked about the whole Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 structure of this, it's very reminiscent of the Taken King, and I think that's appropriately so. The Taken King worked because whilst the campaign story at base itself was okay, it was supported by the fact that Oryx wasn't a villain that you technically killed in that campaign. You defeated him, and you forced him to retreat, but you still had to fight the Taken War in the post-campaign questing, and then, when that was all said and done, you still had to do the raid to actually kill him. So, seems like Final Shape is following this same format, and you know what? Appropriately so. I'm going to jump ahead in my notes here and just talk about that for a second, because I think this is the way that The Witness had to be done right, and Bungie has, as far as I can see thus far, succeeded in that manner. The Witness needs to be a plausible villain, and Bungie did an excellent job with that, but they also needed to appropriately display that this is a near-divine being, and that the best we could realistically hope to do in this campaign was to wound them, and that's what we did. But it also shows us that this near-divine being does indeed have cracks in its facade, and that's a big deal because at the end of the day, that is the reason why we're going to be able to defeat the Witness. It shows that there were indeed different dissenters within the Witness's overall chorus, so to speak, which of course is a key point in the entire story. The cracks in the Witness's facade are realistically the show that we can indeed defeat this thing with the appropriate powers of transcendence, with light and dark. With that being said, the story is not yet done. It's going to conclude in Salvation's Edge. The Witness is inevitably going to be the final boss of that raid, and as a result, any complete story review of things, including reviews on how the Witness pans out as a character generally, are not going to be done until that point has passed. I hope that they take a leaf out of Vow of the Disciple for the raid. I really do hope that they really nail down some more stuff to do with the Witness, the lore behind it, and other bits and pieces coming along in other lore tidbits. Because at this point, I think it is fair to say, this is good, and it's a solid foundation, but we need to see what the rest of the expansion is like before we can appropriately render judgment. So, other things. So far, what I can say about character interactions across this expansion is that they are excellent. Even just gracing some of the post-campaign storytelling and having finished the Legendary campaign, I can tell you that the character interactions in this story are excellent. There are compelling narrative payoffs, there are moments that lead to drama, and there are some genuinely heartfelt moments that will potentially make you cry. I think that saying the campaign has a lot of heart is actually probably the most appropriate way to put it. Because this campaign, yeah, it is very much about the Witness and the end of the universe and the final shape, but it's also about the heroes and what the Witness is putting them through, and the struggles that they've gone through to get to this point. It's a good story arc, and yeah, I'm really glad to see that this is the direction Bungie took with it. I think also there is one thing that I should touch on because I'm a lore nerd in particular, but this is one of those moments where I think I should also refer to a thread that I made on Twitter. There was a point at which I basically said, hey, let's couch our expectations for this story and let Bungie actually tell it. And the reason that I said that is because for a lot of lore nerds like me, we're expecting some kind of payoff to the whole unveiling situation and the idea of, is there a Winnower? Is there a literal gardener? What about this mythology? What's going on here? And there was a lot of hope for that potentially when we saw the trailer and saw the figure that we now know as the Dissenter, or one of the Dissenters. This is one of those moments at which I think I'm really glad that I couched my expectations, because that whole plot thread hints at lore that was teased in the Entelechy lore book back from the Final Shape Collector's Edition. And yeah, it's a compelling notion, the idea that this compound being of many individuals will have some dissenting voices within it. It's a good storyline. I think that that is appropriate to follow. And it is a reasonable answer, and also not a bad one either, for the notion of the veiled statues and what's going on with them, why they're littered all over the place. And it also makes me question, who was really pulling the strings behind those veiled statues? Was Deep Sight given to us and strengthened back in Witch Queen because of a Dissenter, or was that thanks to, say, the Witness? It isn't really clear, and I think that there is a sort of brilliance to that, because giving all the answers here isn't necessary, but it is one of those moments where you have the gist of them, which is enough to answer the question. It's towing that fine line between actually giving a payoff to an important lore question and retaining some of the mystery that allows you to still speculate about the notions of the campaign. We didn't need all of this drip-fed to us, but the notion itself I think is strong enough that it carries through. Now that being said, in the campaign, there is no mention of the Winnower except for the whole first knife bit, which is once discussed in the campaign near the end, and that's not really necessarily talking about the Winnower, it's more talking about the idea of the Hive generally. So yeah, I think it's one of those moments where if the Winnower does show up, it's going to be still much more conceptual than anything else. That being said, I'm glad that I couched my expectations about that, and I'm glad that I was willing to let Bungie tell their own story, because I think the consensus generally is that this is a storyline that has paid itself off in a decent fashion. The people who are playing the campaign and are not huge lore junkies won't know anything about the Winnower and the Gardener and any of this mythology stuff. They're not super deep into Unveiling like any lore nerds who are watching this video. So I think that's just what we need to keep in mind with all of this. It's very much a relative thing. People got a payoff about the veiled statues, people now understand a lot more about the Witness, and the way that this was paid off actually helped to deepen the Witness's character. And again, the fact that it was a flawed and broken and now literally cracked divinity means that that payoff in particular, with the way it was done, was meaningful. It meant that there was a huge reason why these statues were all over the place, but it also meant that the statues were important enough to affect the main story. And whilst I would have loved payoff on the Winnower and Gardener using those statues, I don't know if it would have been quite the same. It wouldn't have had the same narrative impact, because unless there was a lot of deeply baked-in stuff to do with the Winnower and the Gardener and whatnot in that statue itself, I don't know if it would have immediately had a lot of relation to it. Now again, campaign review in progress, entire expansion review in progress, it's still entirely possible that the Winnower shows up. In fact, Entelechy still has hints to it, with the idea that the Witness and whatever communicated with Oryx in the Books of Sorrow isn't quite the same voice. So, yeah, Bungie is leaving us signposts there, and it's very clear that some of the signposts that they did leave already have been paid off in big fashion. Either way, the point is, I think that if we are in that place of wanting those lore threads to be paid off, we need to sit and hold and wait, because we're still not completely done here, and also, perhaps more importantly, I think it's worth remembering that again, you should be able to tell your own story if you are telling this story, and I think that for what it's worth, this is actually a good story so far. Now again, I reserve the right to render final judgment later. I am barely touching the post-campaign questing right now. I'm about to jump into it next. But for my money so far, this is a great start to the end of Destiny's first 10-year saga, and I'm very excited to see where things go next. The story will clearly continue in the post-campaign questing and will conclude in the raid Salvation's Edge, which I will also say it makes a lot more sense now as to why it is 3 days away. We are still in the place where the Witness might enact the final shape. We have wounded a god, but we're not quite there yet. We need to put it to the torch next. So, let's get ready. I'll have more videos and more lore and more things coming up on the channel soon. There is your spoiler and no spoiler initial thoughts about the final shape. So, if you enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like, and let me know down below in the comments section what you thought. And also, one other quick thing. Thank you so much for the 1 million views on the Complete Story of Destiny video. I have never had a video hit 1 million views in such a short amount of time, let alone nearly 100,000 likes. I did the maths, and soon we're also going to hit 1 million watch time hours, which, for comparison's sake, is ludicrous. To give you just a little idea of how much that is, by the time in a few days, when it does actually cross that threshold of 1 million watch time hours, you guys will have been watching that video for a collective 114 years. That's amazing. That's incredible. So thank you so much for all the love and support. We even got mentioned on BBC News, which is quite something. The point is this. Without you guys, that would not have been possible. And I've already harped on about it a whole ton on Twitter, so I'm not going to make this too much longer, but thank you. It means the world. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and know that as usual, your viewership is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.